everyone, and welcome again to Minimalist Gourmet, where today I'll be teaching you how to make a pumpkin roll. That's right, it's that time of year again for all things pumpkin, and why not enjoy the king of all autumn desserts? It's as beautiful as it is delicious. It's quite easy to make as well. With a little technique and my easy to follow recipe, you too will be able to make this at home. Let's get started. We will begin by mixing up the dry ingredients. Here I have 3/4 of a cup all-purpose flour in a large mixing bowl, as well as 1/2 teaspoon baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon baking soda, 1 whole teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon ground ginger, 1/4 teaspoon ground nutmeg, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Don't forget that all of my videos include a full recipe in the description below, so make sure to check that out. We'll add all of our spices and seasonings to our flour and then whisk to make sure that it's thoroughly combined. We'll set this aside as we assemble all of the wet ingredients. I'll be mixing up my wet ingredients here in this measuring cup. I have 1 cup of white sugar measured out, which is a wet ingredient. We're going to add 3 large eggs that are at room temperature, followed by 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Using a whisk, we are going to mix these ingredients very well until thoroughly incorporated and have lightened in color just a bit. It should look like this. Now to this we're going to add our final wet ingredient, which is 2/3 of a cup pumpkin puree. Now it's very important that you use pureed pumpkin, not canned pumpkin pie mix. There is a very big difference. Add your pureed pumpkin directly to your wet ingredient bowl here and use your whisk to mix it very well once again until you have a homogeneous mixture that looks like this. Now we're going to pour our wet ingredients right on top of our dry ingredients. Gently fold the ingredients together using a whisk or spatula. You want to try not to overwork this mixture because it will degrade the quality of the texture in your final cake. So just fold the ingredients together until you just don't see any more streaks of white like this, and once you've reached this stage, you can stop. You are done mixing. To bake our cake, we need a 10-inch by 15-inch baking pan. These are fairly standard sized pans. You probably have one in your kitchen. You can't really go any smaller or any bigger because the recipe just won't work out that well. To our pan, we need to add a layer of parchment paper. You absolutely cannot skip this step. This ensures that our cake will be released from our pan later on. Parchment paper is impregnated with silicone, so nothing really sticks to it, and it will help us release our cake later on from the pan. Do not skip this step, otherwise you'll end up with a mess. And do not use wax paper in this case either, because your cake will come out tasting a bit like crayons. We need to make a couple simple folds of our parchment paper to form a cradle that will allow us to remove our cake after it's been baked. Simply fold in the 2 edges, as you can see here, so that it covers the entire bottom of your jelly roll pan. Then you're going to take the excess on either side and fold it over the edge to create a little bit of an ear that lays over the side. Now when we look at this from the side, it'll make a little bit more sense. The parchment paper should cover the entire bottom and have these 2 ears on either side sticking out to help us remove the cake later on. Additionally, you need some butter or no-stick cooking spray. We need to ensure that nothing sticks to our pan. I'll begin by spreading a little bit of butter along the bottom here on the pan, and this will ensure that not only nothing sticks to the edges, but that our parchment paper stays in place when we start assembling. If not, the parchment paper will kind of slide around like crazy. This really makes it a lot easier to assemble the cake. Spread a layer of butter or no-stick cooking spray and press your parchment paper down firmly along the bottom, and this will hold it in place. Now, along each one of the edges here and the bottom, you also want to lube that up. Pour your cake batter evenly across the entire bottom of the prepared pan. Now you want to make sure to use every last little drop of your cake mix because there really isn't any to waste in this recipe. Once you've poured out every last little drop of your cake batter into the pan, use a spatula, a whisk, a spoon, anything that you have to spread it out into a nice even layer. I also like to shake my pan here to make sure that everything is very nice and even and there aren't any air bubbles. From here, we're going to place this in a preheated 375-degree oven for about 13 to 15 minutes. While your cake is in the oven, you need to prepare your landing zone. Now by this, I mean you need to have a towel ready to receive the cake as soon as it is out of the oven. Now, when picking a towel, you want something very thin, something like this. You do not want something that has a lot of hook and loop style fabric to it, otherwise the cake will stick. So get something with a very tight weave. Now to this, you're going to cover the entire surface in a layer of powdered sugar. If you have a sieve, this will work a little bit better to spread it out, but make sure that it's evenly covered. About 14 minutes later, and our cake is out of the oven. Now you want to test for doneness by taking your finger and pressing it along the top. It should be very moist and rebound when you press it to be nice and spongy. This looks good. We need to turn our cake out onto our prepared towel. Now to do this, just go for it. Commit, flip, and let it go. Just like that. Okay? If you hesitate, it could rip. Now if we prepared our pan correctly, which we did, everything should fall out here nice and easy without any sticking. Let's take a look. Success. Now you want to get this parchment paper peeled off immediately. The cake is still very hot, so just carefully and slowly pull it back at a sharp angle to separate it from the cake. If you prepared everything correctly, again as we did, because technique is key here, nothing should stick. Now we need to roll up our cake. Begin by folding the edge closest to you directly over and flattening it out. Now on the edge away from you, do not pull it tight like this. You want to set it back at least an inch or so that your cake doesn't bind when rolling it up. Now, the cake is very hot, so be careful here and carefully roll it up. You want to be very gentle because the cake could break if you're too aggressive. Simply use even pressure and roll the cake away from you as you can see here, just working your way until you have it all the way down to the other end. Once you hit that seam, you're going to turn it and press it out just like this. I'll be using a wire rack here to cool a cake. We need to sit it out at room temperature for about 30 or 40 minutes because we need it to cool down but not quite completely to room temperature. You want a little bit of airflow here so moisture doesn't get trapped underneath it. While our cake is cooling, we can assemble our filling. The filling begins with one stick, that's 8 tablespoons of butter, that has come up to room temperature completely. Now to this, we're going to add one brick, that is 8 ounces of cream cheese that I've also allowed to come up to room temperature completely. Trust me, you cannot do this with cold ingredients. To this, we're going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now we need to mix this very well, so I'm going to be using a stand mixer. I do recommend in this case use a mixer, however, you can absolutely do this by hand if necessary. Make sure to scrape down your bowl as you go. We're going to blend up our butter and cream cheese mixture here until nice and light and fluffy. After blending up the butter and cream cheese for a while and it's nice and fluffy, we're going to begin by adding 1 cup of powdered sugar very slowly to our mixture. Do not rush this because it'll fly out of your bowl. Again, make sure to scrape down your work bowl as you're going so that nothing sticks to the side. You do want to beat this very well until it's very nice and fluffy and isn't really dense and heavy. It'll work a lot better in the finished product. It should look a little something like this, almost like a whipped cream texture. Our cake has been sitting at room temperature here for about 30 or 40 minutes. Now feeling it, it does feel just slightly warm to the touch, and that's exactly what we're looking for. If the cake is too cold, then it can be a little hard to unroll and potentially break, so having just a little bit of warmth in it is exactly what you want to see. Now, when unrolling this, you're just going to be very gentle here and unroll it using even pressure. Again, just take your time, you won't have any problems. I also like to feel the inside here with my hand to make sure that the cream cheese frosting won't melt. You do not want very much heat at all. Use a spoon or a spatula to place dollops of your cream cheese filling across the top so that it's easier to spread out later. Go ahead and use every last little bit because once again, this recipe is fairly exact. Once you have all of your dollops of cream cheese filling across the top, you're going to spread it out evenly. Again, you want to take your time here and spread it out completely even and make sure that you hit all 4 edges. You want this frosting to completely cover the entire surface and not be bunched up. Don't leave any bare spots, including that interior roll. Once you have all of your frosting leveled out into a nice even layer, we're going to begin rolling. Start your cake roll here gently and use even pressure across the whole surface. Once it's started with your hands, you can switch over to using the towel. I like to pinch the towel and pull directly up, allowing gravity to pull the cake down and form a roll. This will help prevent any of your cream cheese frosting from oozing out of the sides by using too much pressure. So just take your time, just pull up on the towel, and it should make a roll naturally, because it wants to remember the form it was in when we rolled it and let it cool. Place a piece of plastic wrap on your table and gently transfer your pumpkin roll on top. As long as you aren't aggressive, you won't have any problems. You want that seam side down with the cream cheese facing the table. Fold over your saran wrap and gently roll this into place using the plastic. Now you'll see here I'm going to use a little bit of back pressure to create a little bit of tension on the saran wrap, but not too much. This will help form it into a nice form or a nice log that when we put into the fridge, it will refrigerate nicely. Now before we're done here, we're going to actually wrap this in a second layer of saran wrap. This will help it form a nice log as well as keeping any funky flavors from attacking that high fat content of the cream cheese frosting. As I'm rolling it here, I'm just going to very, very gently use a little bit of back pressure so that there's even pressure along the entire face of the pumpkin roll. Take your time, spread it out, go gently, and you will have no problems whatsoever rolling this up. Now, make sure that this seam side with the cream cheese is facing down. You want that to be on the bottom against the face. We're going to put this in the fridge. If you have a wire rack, make sure to put it on a plate or a cutting board or something flat so that it will not press into the pumpkin roll itself. We're going to refrigerate this overnight, but at a minimum, you need at least 4 hours. It's the next day and our pumpkin roll is pulled out of the fridge. Now, because it's cold and has been fully chilled, it actually should hold together fairly well. You can cut it without worrying too much, but again, you still want to be gentle. While unwrapping it here, keep in mind that you want this seam side down, so when unrolling it, use the plastic wrap to help you and turn it out just like that. Your life will be so much easier and your final product will look a lot more beautiful. If you're interested in making your pumpkin roll look Instagram worthy, you can trim off either end as I'm doing here. This step is 100% optional and absolutely not necessary to enjoy the roll. It's also a great excuse for these two pieces to go to the chef. Now, when you're cutting in between slices, you want to wipe your knife. That will make your slices come out a lot cleaner and nicer. Finally, for presentation, we're going to sprinkle some powdered sugar on top. If you have a sieve, that'll help distribute it a little more evenly. I didn't have one, so I just sprinkled it over. And guys, it really is just that easy to make this delicious and beautiful autumn classic in your home tonight. I promise you it's a favorite of everyone in my family, and I'm sure it's going to be one for yours. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your time today, and I hope to see you again here real soon on another episode of Minimalist Gourmet.